I'm finally remaking those videos. Hoorah! Hello, I'm Zaccura and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be part 1 in a 2-part tutorial where I'll walk you guys through the steps on how to draw this basic manga anime style girl. In part 1 we'll go through the steps from sketching to inking and this will be the result. And in part 2 we'll color her in. These videos are kind of a remake and revamped version of a similar 2-part tutorial I made back in 2015, but I figured those videos needed an update because I was very new to making videos back then and so they were a bit cringy. So I hope you guys enjoy this video and follow along, and without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So the tools that you're going to need for part 1 is simply a piece of paper. I am personally using cardstock because that is sort of my go-to paper for coloring in with Copic markers, which is what I'm going to be using in part 2 of this series. But if you don't have cardstock and you are using Copic markers, feel free to use computer paper as well because I find that the two work together not so bad. If you are using something like watercolors to color in later on, then I definitely recommend using a much thicker papers like watercolor paper, or at least something like Bristol board. That way your paper won't warp too much when you color it in. If you're not planning to color in your illustration, or if you are planning to simply use something like colored pencils or just a regular graphite pencil, then feel free to even do this in your sketchbook. Next, you're going to need a pencil and an eraser. It really doesn't matter what kind of pencil or what kind of eraser you use, whether you have a mechanical pencil or a regular yellow number 2 pencil, anything works fine. Next, you're going to need some fine liners. I'm personally using the Pigma Micron fine liners, but any brand should do. If you're not planning on using alcohol-based markers to color later, then you can even use dip pens with India ink. I personally prefer to ink using India ink, however India ink is not alcohol proof and will smudge if you try to use alcohol-based markers such as Copics to color. It is water and fade proof though. You can find fine liners at any arts and crafts store such as Michael's, but if you don't want to invest in these pens, a cheaper alternative would be the Sharpie pen. It isn't as black as Microns and it only comes in one size, but it is a nice cheap pen to start with. Just be sure to use the Sharpie pen and not any other Sharpie brand marker, as I found that some of their other products are not so alcohol proof. And those are all the tools that we're going to be using for this video. And now let's go into the steps on how to draw that manga girl. So like with any great tutorial, step 1 is to draw a circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be super circle-like, just a circle. The next step is to draw a cross, with one line going vertically down the circle, chopping the circle in half, and the other line going along the bottom of the circle horizontally. I like to think of the line going horizontally as the center of the face, the halfway point, but it oftentimes isn't exactly in the center, so don't take it too much to heart that way. Now the line that you see me drawing right here isn't very necessary, and I actually don't usually use this line, but I decided to put it there to see if it would work, and I didn't really see how it helped me at all. But basically that was kind of supposed to be the jawline, and that's the line that will decide where your side of the head begins to taper off towards the chin. But I ended up, as you can see, making the jaw slightly higher than the line that I chose, because really that's the way I thought it looked better. And truthfully, depending on the type of head that you're drawing, your jawline can vary quite a bit. If you're drawing a face that's very slender or very chubby, the jawline will be closer or farther away. But basically what I like to just try and remember is that the jawline should start somewhere below the horizontal center line that I talked about. When you're drawing more masculine faces, the jawline tends to be quite sharp, but since we're drawing quite a feminine girl here, we are going to keep the jaw pretty round. Next, you're going to draw a line that is an equal space apart from the center horizontal line to the jawline, but on the above part. I hope that makes sense. This is going to serve as your upper eye line, and basically what this means is that is the end point, meaning your eyes will not exceed that line. And the center horizontal line will serve as your lower eye line, meaning your eyes should not sink any lower than that line. Next, we're going to add some facial features, starting with the nose. The nose is obviously in the center of the face, so your center vertical line should help you with that. As for the height, it should be right about or right above where your jaw is for your face. As for the actual shape of the nose, because we are drawing a pretty feminine face, I tend to keep the nose not very prominent. Really, it's only pretty much defined at the very bottom, and that's pretty much it. Next, we're going to draw the eyes, which, as I said, as long as they don't go above the upper eye line or below the lower eye line, it's really up to you what shape or size you want your eyes to be. When I'm drawing girls, I usually keep the eyes pretty large, but not too large. It's kind of hard to explain exactly how I draw eyes, so hopefully the footage will help you out with understanding. Also, don't forget the upper eyelid, which is just a little line that goes right above the eye. Since we're still just doing the very basic shapes of the face, I'm not going to draw the irises yet, and instead move on to drawing the mouth. Since I'm trying to make this tutorial as simple as possible, I'm not doing anything fancy with the facial expression. So for the mouth, I'm just doing a slight smile. As for the placement of the mouth, I usually put the mouth just below where the jaw is. I also usually put a little line below the mouth that defines the lower lip line. Next is the eyebrows, and I usually use the upper eye line as a guideline to kind of let me know where the eyebrows roughly should go. But it really depends on what expression you're doing. If someone is really excited, their eyebrows may go way above this line, or if someone's really angry, their eyebrows may go way below this line. But as I already mentioned, I'm doing a pretty blank expression to keep it simple, so the eyes will be pretty normal and just about where that upper eye line is. Now we're going to be drawing the neck and the shoulders. Because we are drawing a girl, I tend to keep the neck pretty thin, but definitely not as thin as some other anime and manga styles I've seen out there, where the necks tend to be very, very thin. My style tends to keep the necks a bit more realistic in its width. As for the length of the neck, I find that it's always usually around from the top of the neck to the bottom of the neck, the same distance as it is from the upper eye line to the jaw. The collarbone is a triangle from the neck that slants downwards slightly before tapering off into the shoulders. Again, this is something that's a little bit difficult to explain, so hopefully the footage will help you out. Only one thing to keep in mind is that we are drawing a girl, so the shoulder span shouldn't be too wide. In the end, I actually do feel that I personally made my drawing have a shoulder span that is a little bit too wide. But usually you want to keep feminine bodies around 1.5 heads to 1 3/4 of a head wide. Next is the ears. The top of the ear is usually right around where the upper eye line is, and the bottom of the ear is usually right around where the jaw is. One thing to remember is don't make your ears stick out too much. You're facing the face from the front, and the ears are on the side of the head, so they shouldn't be sticking out too much. I have no idea how to explain the lines that go within the ear, so just follow the footage. Next, we're going to be drawing the irises within the eyes, which are, of course, circles. However, because she's looking ahead, the top of the iris should actually be covered a little bit by the upper eyelid. Her eyes are pretty open though, so they should only be covered ever so slightly. As for the pupil, I usually just draw this sort of U shape where the bottom of the pupil would be. And then of course we have to add the shinies on the eyes, which are just little bubbles that show where the light source is. When I am drawing a girl, I oftentimes will draw an extra little light bubble on the opposite side. Next, we're going to add the eyelashes, which will really be the first feature that will actually make her look more like a girl, because before then you may have noticed that she could also pass as a young boy or perhaps a more feminine guy. And this is due to the fact that, as I already mentioned with the neck, my anime manga style does have slightly more realistic proportions. So without adding any girly features, the base model does look a little bit more masculine. As for how I actually draw the eyelashes, I usually use the upper eye lid as a guide to sort of sweep it out and just kind of sweep the eyelashes out. Again, I don't think my explanation does it justice, so hopefully you can understand from the footage. As for the lower eyelash though, I tend to actually draw an extra line that's barely below the bottom of the eye and goes up slightly up the side of the eye, and that is where I sort of attach the eyelashes, which of course will be much shorter because they're the bottom eyelashes. As you can see, the eyelashes instantly give her a much more girly look. And we are now finally going to move on to the crowning glory, the hair. And as you can obviously see, I sped up the footage quite a bit because the hair tends to take me the longest because I like spending a lot of time and putting a lot of detail into the hair. As for any tips on how exactly I draw hair, I'd say really to keep it simpler for yourself, think of it less as individual strands of hair and more of as locks of hair. Think of it in chunks, and because you can actually see when I draw the bangs, I actually make certain locks of hair have a flat bottom, and that kind of denotes the fact that it is cut very straight. But by thinking of your hair in terms of locks rather than a blob or actual individual strands of hair will allow you to make hair that looks very detailed while at the same time not bamboozling your head too much, because having to draw every single individual hair would probably drive you crazy. If you are following this video and drawing the exact same hairstyle that I am doing, then just how I did it is I always usually start at the part, which is the top of the head, and I usually start from the center. As you notice when I did the bangs, I did the very front lock of the bangs first, and then I moved on to the left and then moved on to the right from there. What you see me doing here is I am drawing the neck veins, or the neck tendons I guess, that go from the collarbone up to the jaw. If you feel around in your neck, you'll actually feel that, and it is there. Sometimes when people are drawing girls, they tend to skip that part because it tends to make her look too masculine, but again, I always tend to make my drawings a bit more realistic in its proportions, and so I put that line there, but just very lightly. Even though I purposefully made this illustration as plain as I could think of, I couldn't stand the fact that there was nothing interesting going on, so I decided to draw a little bow on her head, and also later you'll see me drawing a bow necklace around her neck. You can skip this part if you don't want to add that there, or you can add your own head design, or do whatever you want. But yeah. Now I'm drawing the collarbone, which goes along the bottom of that triangle that I mentioned earlier. And after that was done, I began drawing the shirt. At first, I thought about just drawing a normal t-shirt, but I felt that was just too uninteresting. So I decided to just kind of do this odd sleeveless shirt, I guess. I don't really know how to explain what it is, but again, the footage will help you, hopefully. And after adding any last finishing touches, like this bow necklace that I added on there, the sketch will be finished. Hooray! Now we're going to move on to inking, which I've sped up the video a lot because it is kind of self-explanatory. Just outline every line that you drew except for the guidelines, obviously. And that's pretty much it. Some tips on how to use your fine liners. Be confident with your strokes, don't get stopped up and nervous because that will simply just make your lines more wiggly and look less nice. So just be confident and know that it's just a drawing, it's just one drawing. Hopefully your microns or fine liners are a little newer than mine because mine were a little bit dried out, and so I had to go over my lines a lot of times. If you're curious about what sizes I used the 05 for the basic outlines like the chin and the neck and so forth. Then for the details in the face like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, eyebrows, so forth, I used the 01. And for anything in between like the hair, I think I used the 03. But for things like the hair, you could also use the 05 or the 01, whichever one you like better. Apologies for the odd change in lighting. I usually use daylight to film my videos and the days are getting shorter, so bear with me. Hopefully it's not too annoying. And after you're done inking everything out, all that's left is to erase your pencil sketch underneath your outline. Just one thing to keep in mind when you're erasing is to be gentle and careful so that this doesn't happen. Don't worry though, I didn't crease it that bad, so it ended up not showing at all after the illustration was finished. And once you're done wiping away all the eraser shavings, you are finished! Dum 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 dum! Yay! Hooray! You did it! So that brings us to the end of part 1. I really hope you guys were able to follow along and that everything could be easily understood. It was created to be more geared towards those who are very new to drawing anime and manga, but if you are more experienced, I hope this video was at least somewhat entertaining. Of course, this is just one way to draw manga, as every manga artist has their own style, but hopefully this gave you some insight into how I draw manga style girls. If you did find this video helpful or entertaining in any way, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. If you did draw your own girl after watching this video, I'd love to see it. You can always tag me on Twitter and Instagram, links to both are in the description box. One funny thing that I realized after this outline was finished was that she bears a striking resemblance to Gabby from my Halloween video. Hey, maybe this is pre-marshmallow Gabby. Oh gosh, inside jokes. I do plan on having this outline uploaded as a free download, so for those who didn't draw their own outline or just want to use the exact same image that I'll be using, can print it out to use as coloring practice for part 2, the video for which will be coming up in the following days, so stay tuned. And until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!